Thanks.
I'm very pleased to have with me today an extremely important guest, a woman who has become a spokesperson for women's rights and certainly the Me Too movement. I have Juanita Broaddrick. Juanita, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's so nice to be here, Jason. Thanks for asking.
And it's lovely to see you. This is the first time we're meeting by video, of course. You are a very brave woman. As most people know, unless they've been living under a rock, of course, you were assaulted by former President Bill Clinton back in 1978. And I know this is going to be a very difficult conversation for you to have because, of course, we'll be reliving essentially one of the most horrific events of your life. And I do want to be very clear because in watching previous interviews that you've done in preparation for our conversation, I've seen interviewers refer to this as sexual assault, alleged assault. This was an unwanted, forcible sexual intercourse, full rape and physical assault by Mr. Clinton.
Oh, yes, it was. And for years, Jason, I would say sexual assault.
Right.
Then in 2016, if you'll remember when Sean Hannity was interviewing Trump.
Yes.
And talking about the New York Times coming out with all of these allegations against Trump. And Sean was saying, Kathleen Willey and Paula Jones and Juanita Broaddrick, are they going to talk about them about sexual assault? And then Hannity said, and then Trump said, rape. I could have fallen out of the chair. It's as though he was talking directly to me. And it sort of gave me the permission to say rape.
And it's important.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's such a horrific word.
And I think it's also important for people who are watching now, because there are many people who are in their 20s or possibly even younger who weren't even alive in 1978. And it's difficult possibly for them to understand why you wouldn't have come forward. You were married at the time. It was a very shameful incident. You were blaming yourself in some regards. And this was a man of great power even at that time. He was the Arkansas State Attorney General. And you were fearful of a lot of different things that might happen. Now, of course, you've written a book called You'd Better Put Some Ice on That, which is a quote that Mr. Clinton said after he violently bit you, causing your lip to swell up. That was all he had to say. But I want to clarify, you've always been a businesswoman. You had your own nursing home. You've been financially well off and have not been doing this to get money, as some people would allege. And that's actually an insane allegation because you've been through quite a lot.
Yeah, it's, and so many people, say, well, you've taken money for this. And I have no idea what I would have done had I been very poor and was trying to feed my children. So anybody that took money for this, if they had good reasons, that I'm not going to blast that. But there's no way I would have taken money for telling my story.
Right. Now, very recently, Mr. Clinton has come out, as if You'd Better Put Some Ice on That wasn't an horrendous enough thing to say. Former President Bill Clinton, just a few days ago, came out with what may be the stupidest comment he's made certainly this week. He said that there's a new standard for what you can do to people against their will, or some ridiculous statement like this. What did you think about this? Norms have changed for what you can do to somebody against their will. Why do you suppose Bill Clinton thinks there's anything that it's okay to do to someone against their will?
he felt, I mean, he acted like he was privileged the day of the rape. He acted like it was something that I shouldn't be upset about. It was his privilege. And it's as though when he went on all of these interviews, it's like he went to sleep in 1999 with that same impression that he had back then and woke up in 2018 to a new world.
Right. See, he certainly does seem like a guy who feels that the world is his to do with as he pleases. It must have been quite upsetting for you to watch this man rise to power. I mean, here it is. He's attacked you, he's violated you, and he's lauded around the world as one of the greatest elder statesmen held in such high regard.
Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting. 2 or 3 months back, when all the victims came out against, I think his name's Eric Schneiderman, the Attorney General of New York, and one of them made this comment, and she said, "What do you do when the most powerful law enforcement officer of the state is your abuser?" And I thought, my God, that's where I was long before there was Me Too, long before we were even into this era, you know, of the Me Too. It was frightening. He was the Attorney General. People would say, "Why didn't you go to the police?" He was the police. He absolutely regulated my businesses. The nursing homes were responsible to the Attorney General's office through the governor's office.
Wow.
He was both, you know, in that amount of time. And I just put my head down, went to work, and tried to become the best business person I knew how to try to forget what happened to me, because there was no way I could have come forward back then.
Right, and these are important details, I think, for people to hear, because in the context of 2018, women are obviously much more empowered right now than they were in 1978 or even 1998. And yeah, everything you're saying really resonates. I mean, who do you go to when the authorities are the ones violating your rights? And we've certainly heard quite a bit about that happening. And in your case, it's such a personal and just, I mean, he's assaulted everything, your womanhood, you're physically been assaulted, he's assaulted your integrity. It really is quite terrible. Now, Juanita, I don't know if you've had the chance to see my brief encounter with President Clinton, but I spoke with him at a book signing in Barnes & Noble in New York City, where I asked him about his relationship with Chris Gowan, who is defending Imran Awan, and he smiled quite gregariously and said he doesn't know anything about that. And I've heard in your previous interviews you've commented, Bill Clinton is obviously a very charismatic guy. He smiles, he shakes your hand. He's got a way about him that really does draw you in.
Yes, oh, he does. When I first met him, when I was volunteering for his gubernatorial campaign back in '78, you know, he came to my nursing home on a campaign tour. And after we had the photo op, which is the cover of my book, he comes over to me. He's so engaging, and he never lost eye contact. And that was the time that I took the opportunity to say, hey, you know, light bulb goes off. This man's probably going to be our governor. I need to tell him about the horrible conditions of nursing home reimbursement. And so that's how we arranged to get together in Little Rock to talk about my ideas for the nursing home industry.
And of course, you were approaching this in good faith as a businesswoman who was concerned about the state of nursing homes there in Arkansas. The book, of course, is called You'd Better Put Some Ice on That, and people can get that on Amazon.com. If you are a Prime member, you can get it for free on Kindle, or it's $17.99 on paperback. And it's important that people read this and understand what Bill Clinton is all about, and maybe gain some insight into at least why he thinks he needs to readjust his assessment of what he can do to people against their will. Now, you've lived in Arkansas all your life, right?
Right, yes.
So you must know quite a bit about the Clintons and their rise to power through the attorney general position, the governor position, and Hillary's work at the Rose Law Firm. Have you heard at all about this individual named John Glasgow?
No, I haven't.
John Glasgow was the chief financial officer of a company called CDI that was a construction contractor that actually built the Bill Clinton Presidential Library. Now, this is possibly a ridiculous question, but have you ever been to the Presidential Library?
Yes.
You have?
Yes. Back when Candace Jackson wrote her book about the Clinton victims, their lives. Candace Jackson is the one that is an assistant to DeVos in Washington. And she's an attorney. And so this was sort of a publicity thing for her book. And we did go down to the Clinton Library. It was very, it was hard to do. And if I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't go.
I imagine that must have been quite emotional for you to see a monument to your attacker. I mean, very few, well, actually, I don't know the statistics, but of the women that do suffer rape, I would imagine very few of them have to, well, I could be wrong. I suppose many women are raped by people that they know, but to have to see your attacker rise to such status, the President of the United States of America, the most powerful position a man can achieve, it literally is like rubbing your face in it every single day.
Oh, it was terrible. There was so much in my life. I mean, I could rarely watch TV that he wasn't on it. And it was a race to see how quick I could change the channel every time he came on. Had to change my church services. I was Episcopalian at the time. And
why did you have to change the church services?
Because the regular service would do the prayers for the government. And in their prayers, they would say, the President of the United States, Bill Clinton. And I'd have to hear that over and over. But my husband and I decided to switch to the 8 o'clock service where they just mentioned the title and I didn't have to hear his name. And there's just little things like that to try to avoid any kind of mention of this horrible man.
Yeah, and it's really sad how it haunted you like that. Now, of course, you testified for the Kenneth Starr investigation that ultimately resulted in sort of nothing happening. Basically, there was an impeachment that amounted to kind of a simple censure of Mr. Clinton. Did you feel at that time like he might actually get any justice, that Kenneth Starr, you interacted with his investigators. What was your impression of their professionalism in their investigation?
Oh, they were so nice to me. They were absolutely wonderful in the deposition. But the main questions that they asked me, Jason, were, have you been threatened? And I'd only been threatened way back in '78 by Hillary Clinton.
Really?
And have you been paid off? Have you been anyway? There was no obstruction of justice, but people still love to cling on to this and say, you know, Kenneth Starr found her discredited. He discredited her. That is a bold lie. I've never been treated so nice as I was, and they were very sympathetic, but also told me, you know. After I answered the questions, there's no obstruction of justice. I never came forward because I didn't want to come forward. And that's what they were trying to find out.
Right. So obviously Kenneth Starr had a very specific agenda in terms of what he wanted to prosecute Bill Clinton for. He was not prosecuting Bill Clinton for rape or sexual assault or anything like that. It was just obstruction. So he wanted to see if...
But it's very interesting. I had several conversations with Dave Shippers, who was the lead counsel for Henry Hyde and that whole group. And in his book called Sellout, he refers to pleading with the Democrats on the committee, just look at the case. He said, just look at her deposition. We're not going to bring it to the hearing, but you need to know what this man is capable of. And one senator from Alaska, Ted Stevens, I believe was his name, and he was a Republican. And he stood up and said, I don't care if he raped her, got up and shot her dead, you're not going to get the votes.
Wow. Say that man's name again, please.
Ted Stevens. I believe he was killed in an airplane crash.
Oh.
But it's in Dave Cooper's book, how Henry Hyde and Dave tried to get these people. We're not going to bring this to the hearing. Don't worry about that, but just please read it. Not one person read it of the Democrat. Not one.
Well, I'm surprised that someone who was on the Clinton side would die in a plane crash. That usually seems to happen to people who go against the Clintons.
Yeah.
And there is an extensive Clinton body count there in Arkansas. It's pretty well known among the people in Arkansas that that's fact, right?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, for 40 years, I've looked over my shoulder. You know, it's been hard, you know.
Mm-hmm. And did you get a chance to see the Inspector General report or hear any news reporting about it? Do you think that will make a difference here?
Oh my God. Who knows what's going to happen with that? I tweeted this morning, whoever has the power to fire Strzok, are you in a coma?
Right. Yeah. It really does seem like nothing is happening and that we don't, you know, the Clintons for, as you said, 40 years have gotten away with so many horrendous crimes. I mean, we're talking about rape, murder, financial crimes in the billions. I've said many, many times with Charles Ortel, who of course you know well, that this is the largest and most sophisticated criminal syndicate in the history of humankind.
Yes.
People don't really fully appreciate that.
And you don't have to live in Arkansas to know that. Of course, we've always heard the rumors, and people have always known things, and people have always died that knew things. And it just follows them like, I don't know what, but in everything bad follows them.
Right. And speaking of following, people who want to get in touch with Juanita or follow her more closely can do that on Twitter. She is at ATENSNUT.
Right, it's a tennis nut.
A tennis nut.
I played a lot of tennis.
Ah, now it makes sense. But of course, people remember during the election, during the campaign of 2016, that President Trump had invited you to appear with Kathleen Willey and some of the other victims of Mr. Clinton. How did you feel at that moment when, you know, we all saw Bill Clinton making the famous face where he looked shocked to see you all there? That must have been some small sense of satisfaction, right?
Well, we did not get to see it at the time because we walked beside the little bleacher area where he was sitting, but it was shown to us later that as we walked in, that he had turned around and saw what was happening and then had that expression on his face.
It's a classic image of Bill Clinton. I mean, certainly when he was president, he always seemed extremely confident. As I said, even in my brief meeting with him, he is a man of great charisma and poise, and he looks like the cat that just ate the canary in this picture.
Oh yeah, especially when he was in the impeachment hearing and very sheepishly says it depends on what the meaning of is. That look, you just want to slap him right in the face.
And have you had occasion to actually personally interact with or even be in proximity to Mr. Clinton since this incident occurred?
You mean since 1978? Yes. Back in 1991, I was at a nursing home seminar in Little Rock, and it was getting close to noon, and some gentleman comes to the door and said, Mrs. Broaddrick is wanted in the hallway. So I get up and go out, and my nurses, who were with me, two of them, followed me out the door. And the gentleman pointed down around the corner, and I walked down around the corner, and as I go around,
You
his
must have felt a chill through your whole body.
Oh, I can't tell you how shocked I was. And I just halted right in my steps. And he rushes over to me and he tries to take my hand and I back up.
Wow.
And he says, I'm so sorry for what happened. I'm a changed man. I'm a family man. All of this garbage, was just flowing out of his mouth. And I stood there in this state of not comprehending what was going on. And I finally said to him, you go to hell. And I walked off. And when I got back to my nurses, they said, what was that all about? And I said, he apologized to me for what happened 13 years ago. And we went to our lunch just right away, and we were sitting at the table, and the three of us were saying, just pondering this, saying, well, did he really mean it? What was that all about? And then, of course, a week later, he announces that he's running for president.
Ah, very strategic.
Yeah, but what frightened me more than that was the fact that he knew where I was at that day and at that moment in time. But he was just trying to cover up loose ends.
Well, exactly. I would say you're lucky to be a loose end who's approached like that.
Breathing.
Right,
Yeah.
rather than so many of the others. Now, recently we've heard about the hanging death of both Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain. Do you know anything about those stories? Do you feel like those are Clinton body count stories at all? It's hard to tell.
Oh, well, you'll always have the conspiracy theorist out there trying to say that there's something like that. I hope not. I know they both suffered from depression, from what I hear, and I hope it was something that they decided to do on their own, which is still horrible. But who knows in this day and time? The Clinton line goes to so many people.
Right.
They are involved with so many people and have control over so many people's lives.
Right, and depression, of course, is a very serious matter. I was most surprised by the death of Anthony Bourdain. He's a recovered heroin addict, and it just strikes me that I don't think about suicide or the logistics of it, so it's difficult to put yourself into someone's head like that, but it just seems to me that someone who wanted to end their life, why wouldn't he just inject himself with heroin rather than the painful
I don't understand the hangings. Yeah, I'm a nurse, and there's no way I can understand that. And of course, the people have come up with the tweets that he had made about Hillary Clinton the month before.
Right.
And you have to wonder, but gosh, it's so sad. My son, who's an attorney, was a huge fan of Anthony Bourdain and was just in a state of shock and sorrow about his death.
Right. And it's always amazing to me how these things are, immediately they say no foul play is suspected and he's cremated and there's no investigation. There was a very strange coroner who worked in the coroner's office there in Arkansas for many, many years. Malik, I think his name was. And he seemed to be quite helpful to the Clintons in terms of declaring things as suicides and preventing any sort of further investigation. It seems like finally, after 40 years, Juanita, we may finally be at the moment where the Clintons may, in fact, face justice. Now, you've had some personal interactions with President Trump. Do you feel like we're about to see the Clintons finally face justice?
Oh, I don't know, Jason. I can just hope and pray that we are. But I've been through so many gotcha moments for 40 years, hoping that this would come to be a reality. But I don't know. I'm just hoping.
What was the moment in the past where you felt most strongly that it was about to happen? I guess the impeachment, was that?
Yeah, I really had hopes for the impeachment and was so disappointed in NBC Dateline holding my interview until after the impeachment was over. I was told that it would be broadcast during the impeachment and how important it was by Lisa Myers. And that was her belief. You know, she really thought that it would be. But for them to have held my interview, I think was so wrong.
And I think Lisa Myers did a very good job. It was a fair interview, and she certainly gave you plenty of time to share your story. It was a very emotional interview, of course. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good example of how someone like Lisa Myers is simply a journalist who certainly doesn't have control over NBC. And as I have always said, when we have these multi-million-dollar and multi-billion-dollar news outlets, it's very difficult for the true facts to come out, and for news
Yeah.
that is protecting people like yourself and individuals out there around the country. It's, this is serving the billionaires. It's got an advertiser-driven agenda that prevents things like this from coming out. So I'm certainly hopeful that President Trump can turn the tide, and that we'll at least see indictments for the financial crimes the Clintons have been involved in.
Oh, I am too. I'm really hopeful that he will do something. And you know, that was almost a campaign promise in that second debate that I attended, when he had that great line, "Well, you'd be in jail." We cracked up.
Absolutely. I have to tell you, Juanita, I've never been a sports fan, and when I go to restaurants or bars and see people screaming at the television during a sports match, I just can't relate to that. But as I sat on my couch in my house, my apartment, watching you and the other women on that debate, when Donald Trump said that you'd be in jail, I literally leapt off the couch, screamed at the television.
We did too. We wanted to stand up and clap.
That was why I voted for him.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
We need to have justice in this country, no matter who the person is. We cannot have individuals who feel that they're above the law, who can go around testing the limits of what they can do to people against their will. It's really important to me that both Bill and Hillary be brought to justice. There's been so much talk about her server and her emails, and we hear, even just yesterday, she had the audacity to tweet out, "Oh, but my emails," as if to minimize it. Can you believe the hubris?
I know, and people thought that was so funny. I hope she doesn't think it's funny very long from now.
Does it amaze you as much as it does me that people are walking around the country and they think it's totally okay to store classified information on servers that are... I don't think people fully understand the technology of this, and I know you're not an IT expert per se, but Hillary is trying to classify this as just using private email, as if I send a message to you, and she wants to sort of skate over the portion where she's also created her very own private email domain and hosting all of the messages and activity of that domain from a personally controlled server. So when she gets subpoenaed by Congress for that evidence and destroys it, there are potentially no other copies there. It's not like me sending you an email through Gmail where the FBI can go to Google and get the records. This is a gigantic crime, and it's hiding many other crimes.
Oh, I know. Just like I said, their crimes extend down into so many other powerful people. Yes. But for her to smash the phones or Blackberries and to acid wash, you know, all of those. Why is this woman not in jail?
She's another one who every time you see her on TV, it's got to make your blood boil. And these people are on TV and the newspaper every day.
Yeah, she's opened her mouth sometimes a little too much, because after my Dateline interview, I went back into almost hiding. You know, I didn't come out, I didn't do a whole lot. But when she tweeted that all survivors of sexual abuse should come forward and be heard and be believed, and we're with you, that's when I got my grandson to teach me how to use Twitter.
There you go.
And I have not let up since. I knew I had to answer this woman.
Absolutely, and that's why it's important for people watching the program right now to follow Juanita on Twitter and to retweet her various important tweets when the Clintons come out with these type of brazen, sort of nonsensical sound bites or whatever, everyone should be following a tennis nut on Twitter there. And you can also purchase Juanita's book, You'd Better Put Some Ice on That, to learn some more about the ordeal that she went through. Now, just briefly back on this Clinton Foundation, this thing is part of a gigantic set of financial crimes. Charles Ortel has pointed to information that indicates that the very construction of the William J. Clinton Presidential Library may have hidden millions or tens of millions of dollars worth of theft. Now, people are going to this thing all the time. Can you describe it to us? I've never been there. What is it like to be in the Bill Clinton Presidential Library?
I only went on the first floor, just the main area, because after I walked through a little bit of it, I told Kathleen and Willie and I went together. I said, I can't stand this. I have to leave. So I'm not a good person. I just couldn't finish the tour. It was too difficult.
It's a really unique situation that you're in, because there's never been a more lauded rapist than Bill Clinton.
Yes. And for him to come out like he has recently and play the victim card is absolutely disgusting. And to say what he did to Judy Woodruff, that, the norms had changed about what you can do against a person's will, I wonder if the thought of me went through his mind at that time, because I just went ballistic.
Yeah.
He feels so privileged.
I mean, I believe we're looking at the behavior of a psychopath, because
Yes.
It's difficult to imagine a person with so little empathy, so little understanding for his actions and the impact that it has on other people. I found it quite interesting that during that interview where he said that, he was seated next to his co-author of that ridiculous book, The President's Pants Are Missing. I mean, the president is missing. And of course, Mr. Patterson, in my view, had a look of shock on his face when Bill Clinton said that.
He looked like he kept trying to jump into the conversation. He got up on the edge of his chair and was just looking back and forth like, oh my God, what's going to happen now?
He couldn't believe what was being said by Bill Clinton. Now, it's interesting to note, James Patterson has also written a book about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, what do you think about these stories that Bill Clinton has been on Jeffrey Epstein's jet? He's traveled to this Lolita Island where allegedly underage girls were involved in sexual activity. I mean, this is a man of some really monumental depravity that we're talking about here. What can you say about any of that stuff?
Oh, well, what was it? 28 trips?
Some huge number.
On the Lolita. Why would he be going there?
Right.
Epstein, we know, was a pedophile and served time. Or is he still serving time?
Well, he was given actually a very short sentence, remarkably short sentence, and people are speculating that may have been due to him working with the FBI as an informant or some sort of something. Does it amaze you to see the level of corruption that's being revealed in the FBI with the firing of James Comey and Andrew McCabe and now this whitewashed Inspector General report?
Well, if you listen to Rush and you watch Sean Hannity and Fox, you knew that it was true. It's just amazing to see it finally come out, but what will be done about it? That's what we have to worry about, Jason. What's really going to happen now? Is this just the beginning, or are they going to try to make this IG report the end of it?
Right. I'm certainly hopeful that this is just the beginning and that there's
me too.
Far more that we'll see, because it really goes to the root of the Clintons' basic demeanor, that they've been doing crimes for so long. It's almost absurd for them to think that there'd be any repercussions. And what about Don Tyson and some of these other Arkansas figures, the Stevens that have been associated with the Clintons? Do you have any interactions with any of those type of people or hear anything about them there in Arkansas?
No, you always hear the rumors, but you never, I don't really know too much about those people. The Clintons were very connected, all over. I mean, they were connected to money. Anybody who had money, they were connected to them. Mm-hmm. And that's what we all knew. But I think that when he started to run for president and Jennifer Flowers came out, I thought, oh, this will do him in. Right. Listen, those people are bulletproof. And he has that personality about him. And, that goes back to 1978. When that man had raped me and I was sitting up on the side of the bed crying, there was no empathy, there was no interaction with me, except this look of frustration and bewildered. He was like he was bewildered that I was crying. And that's when he made that weird statement to me, "Don't worry, I'm sterile. I had mumps when I was a child."
Whoa.
And then goes over, puts on his coat, walks to the door. I'm still blubbering. And he motions to my mouth, which was swollen, huge, and
because he had bitten you.
Oh, yeah, he'd bitten my top lip to keep me quiet. And then he calmly puts on his sunglasses, motions to my lip and says, "You better put some ice on that," and walks out the door. And I rushed over and locked it.
That detail about the mumps was something that had escaped me. So I was going to ask you, but I wasn't sure how to word it, if you were worried about becoming pregnant after the assault. But obviously that didn't happen. So how does he explain Chelsea if he's sterile from an illness as a child? Is there any truth to the Buell-Hubble rumors there?
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. In fact, when I found out that Hillary Clinton was pregnant, and I'm trying to remember back because I've been asked this before, I remember that she was abroad in Europe somewhere, either in Switzerland or Sweden, and that's when the in vitro was first begun back then. So I just assumed that she had used a sperm donor.
Wow.
Even back then, I've never thought that he could father children. He was too emphatic with me when he said, "I'm sterile. I had mumps when I was a child." And his wife, his mother was a nurse, and she would have nursed him through those times. And I can just hear her, I can't remember what her name was, saying to him, "Well, you're not ever going to have children." He probably had some complications from mumps. Just like he said to me.
But what about Danny Williams? Of course, I'm sure you've seen the story of Danny Williams, the black man.
I feel sorry for Danny, but I've never believed it. I believe that something would have come up. He would have had surely some DNA of some kind to prove long before now.
Boy, he looks a whole lot like Bill Clinton, and he seems sincere.
Yeah, and I do feel sorry for him, but I've just never believed it.
Now, I don't know that much about mumps. Is that a side effect of mumps, that it...
Yes. Oh, yes, very definitely. You can have what you call orchiditis, where the scrotum swells and destroys the ability to make sperm.
Uh-huh. And is it like 100%, or is it possible that, I have no proof, obviously, that Danny Williams...
Even being a nurse, I just know that many men back in the era when mumps were so prevalent when I was growing up, that many men became sterile because their disease wasn't handled right and complications set in. And that's the main complications of mumps. But it was just so out of... there I was crying, and he makes that statement to me. And I thought, my God, this man's crazy. Why is he making that statement to me?
Well, it's because that's what he's worried about, because obviously a child with him would give you evidence of the assault. So he's setting his own mind at ease and really reiterating that he just doesn't
Yeah.
care about you or anyone else at all.
No, no, and that's his persona.
Yeah. Wow, it's a really devastating story. Very, very sorry that you've had to endure this, but I don't know. What would you have to say to other women that suffer rape at the hands of a powerful individual?
Well, I think the most important thing is to preserve any evidence that you can. First, make yourself safe. You know, that's the most important thing is after the rape, get away from the situation. But before you leave the rape scene, try to preserve anything that you can to prove who raped you.
Right.
And to talk to somebody.
Yes.
All of the people like me, I did. I told 5 people. And then, of course, the nurse that found me 30 minutes after the rape that was with me. It's just so important to remember everything that you can about it. Of course,
Right.
it was embedded in my mind for years.
But you've made a great point there. I mean, of course, 40 years ago, people weren't having these types of open dialogues. You wouldn't have been on television talking about this, and certainly we didn't have YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and the internet where independent forums like this could exist. So I think it's a powerful message that you share with young women or women of any age who might suffer this type of fate, that preserving the evidence is critically important. I'm personally shocked that there is a statute of limitations on rape, because certainly even 40 years on, you live with this every day in your
Right.
heart, in your mind, in any public appearance that you make. You carry it with you everywhere. It seems unfair that your rapist should be able to walk away simply because of the passage of time.
Oh, I know. It's like I've talked with other rape victims. I get a lot of emails and messages from people who are suffering, you know, a lot of what I did. And some of them my age that went through what I did back when we were told men will be men, just deal with it. But
Wow.
it's like it becomes part of your DNA. It's like I tweeted 2 years ago, longer, that it never goes away. You'll go on and you'll have good times and good days, and then all of a sudden it comes flooding back from some cause or another. It's always with you.
And do you find yourself becoming emotionally overwhelmed still?
Yes. In fact, if I have to go through the rape, you know, and I have to talk about that, it's just like I tweeted, you know, that in interviews I don't talk about the rape anymore. But I tweeted a page from my book that tells you what I went through. You can read it, but I just can't talk about it. You know, I thought I was over that when I did the interview 2 days before the second presidential debate with Aaron Klein and Breitbart. And I had told Aaron, you know, I don't want to go into the rape. And he said, we'll stop. We'll do whatever you need to do. And there I was, 73-year-old woman, going through those details and blubbering like I did when it happened. It never goes away.
I'm sorry you've had to go through that, Juanita.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
hopefully your strength in coming forward will help other victims, as you've said. And I'm certainly hopeful that we're getting close to a time where Bill and Hillary Clinton will have to answer for their behavior, for their crimes,
Me too.
throughout the past 4 decades.
Me too.
Juanita, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap it up for this morning?
No, and I appreciate so much being here, Jason. It's so nice to meet you.
Likewise, I appreciate you joining me. You're an incredibly brave woman, and I'm delighted to have met you, and thank you for sharing your story with us. I do want to remind people that if they want to learn more about this horrible situation, you can, of course, purchase the book. You'd better put some ice on that. And I apologize, I don't have the book ready. I'm just going back here on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon.com, and you can also choose to purchase it from retailers that aren't controlled by the CIA. But the book is called You'd Better Put Some Ice on That. It's a very highly rated book, and this is Juanita Broaddrick's recounting of the horrendous rape, not merely sexual assault, but the violent, unwanted sexual intercourse forced upon her by former President Bill Clinton, a disgraceful individual by many measures. Juanita, I want to thank you for joining me this morning, and I wish you all the best. Anytime you'd like to come back, please, we'd love to have you.
Oh, Jason, thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day, and I want to thank everyone for watching. I'll be back later this afternoon with Quinn Michaels.